Yeah, absolutely glad to be here. Yesterday and late night show with Matt Anderson last night. It's been a lot of talk on the Inside the Gamecocks show, so I love it. I love it.
Checks in the mail. That's right. Checks in the mail. All right. So, John, it's easy to ask the initial reaction, right? Everybody wants, oh, what's your reaction to the Paul Mainieri hiring? I'm not so sure there's many people out there that think from a baseball standpoint this is a bad hire. That'd be pretty ludicrous if you ask me. But he has been out of coaching for a couple of years. Your thoughts on how that could or will it not impact at all Gamecock baseball?
Well, he's got a couple of guys who have been in it who are going to be assistant coaches for him, and Monty Lee and Terry Rooney. So they're the guys who are going to be doing the heavy lifting from a recruiting standpoint anyway, which is kind of the big deal when you look at what's transpired in college baseball the last few years since he's been out with regards to navigating NIL and the transfer portal. And that's what those two guys are good at, meaning Terry Rooney and Monty Lee. So he'll have some guidance, and I don't think he forgot how to coach the game so much. So Paul is a disciplinarian. He's a guy who truly believes in culture and building team, and that'll be his role as the head coach, and Monty and Terry will be doing the heavy lifting from a recruiting standpoint.
All right, so Monty is going to sign a 3-year deal that is confirmed, and he will remain on staff. That's a big deal. We'll get more into Monty in just a little while. As far you've followed Paul Mainieri's career, John. I mean, the guy's won a national championship. He's won over 1,500 games. He's one of the best to ever do it. Notre Dame, never been an assistant, by the way. He went from being a head coach in high school baseball to being a head coach in college baseball at Air Force before going to Notre Dame and heading on to LSU. What have you learned about Paul Mainieri's coaching style over the years? I know you've probably dug a little bit more into that. What do you like? What do you dislike?
Yeah, well, I mean, I touched on it just a second ago. I mean, he's a guy who's gonna, run a program that is disciplined. I mean, he is certainly it's going to be a little bit different than what it's been here under the last couple of head coaches. Like, it was very much player driven, player coaches, and it's not that players don't like Mainieri, but is going to be a little bit different style than what they've been used to, which is probably a good thing. I do think that college athletes need and want a little bit more structure than maybe professional minded coaches do. So, I do think that this is going to be a good thing for South Carolina and this group of guys. But, you can't, like you said, you can't argue his resume as a coach. Like, he's been tremendous. I'm not that smart. I can't even count up how many years out of however many that he's been in regionals and College World Series and NCAA tournaments and all that stuff. So he's been tremendous in terms of what he's done as a head coach. And I certainly think that he probably I don't think he will have lost a step from the decision making process of what he needs to do from the top step.
He's been a part of 21 regionals, 5 World Series in his time, including that national championship. So Terry Rooney is going to come with him, John. Terry's been around the block. Terry has been everywhere from George Washington to LSU twice. He's been at Alabama. He was the head coach at UCF. He's been the pitching coach at Houston. He's been at Stetson, ODU. I mean, you name it. He's been around. Of course, he was recruiting coordinator at Purdue. But according to your reporting, is he being named the pitching coach? What's going on there?
Yeah, he'll be the pitching coach. He'll be the guy who has that title and chiefly in charge of those guys. And he's done it very successfully before. He was the pitching coach on LSU's national championship team, but he followed Mainieri from Notre Dame. And he's been a pitching coach in a few different places since he was the head coach at UCF. And he didn't he didn't have the best record as a head coach down at UCF. Went to just a couple of regionals and about 7 years, and those were kind of early in his tenure. But went to Alabama for a year after that, and spent some time at Houston and Purdue, and is now back at LSU in a development off field role, player development role. So I do think that being back onto the field is certainly important to him and having this role. But, I do know as well that he's and I'm not knocking him as a pitching coach. He was a national champion pitching coach. But, he's made his name in the coaching world from a recruiting standpoint. So, I do know that he's going to be very heavily relied upon from that standpoint.
All right, so this is Coach Tanner works in the dark of the night sometimes, right? Let's go back through the process for a minute. Paul Mainieri's name wasn't on any radar at all, and Coach Tanner, went through the gamut. He spoke with contacts, kind of made his rounds, spoke with those very close in his tight circle there. Of course, Monty was a finalist for this job, and then here comes the wild card play. So, have you learned any more about this search process?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know when Ray first spoke with him about coming to South Carolina, and who knows when it was. I mean, I'm not even talking days. I mean, maybe they've talked about it over the years. Mainieri's been out of coaching for a bit. Him and Mainieri have been close for a really long time. And, I don't know that they haven't talked about it years ago, that maybe eventually they can work together. But I know that it wasn't really known around here by anybody apart from Ray Tanner until over the weekend. Now, when they actually spoke, I'm not real sure. But it started to be known around athletics on Saturday, maybe Saturday night, Sunday, but I wasn't able to confirm until Teddy Cahill put it out that that Mainieri was actually a candidate. So it was very quiet with him for a while, but I don't know exactly when at this point when Ray first started talking to him about this opening.
All right. So, what has Coach Mainieri been doing the last couple of years? I know that that Glenn, who's going to be on in 45 minutes or so, said he does feel better because when he retired, he had a bunch of back issues and some neck issues and all this stuff. So he said he's been playing plenty of golf. Has he been trying to get back into the game? Has he been interested in other positions? Have other guys been interested in him? What do you know about that?
Oh, I think the guy you're having on next is probably best equipped to answer that question. I know he was involved in the coaching searches in Miami and Notre Dame, but I don't know. I guess playing golf and maybe laying by a pool. I don't know. I don't know.
Man, what's wrong with these guys? You got all kinds of money. You get a pool at the golf course, and you want to get back in the pressure cooker.
I actually went down the rabbit hole a little bit on this today, though, and it looks like from the look of it, he stayed kind of engaged with LSU's program.
Yeah,
and Jay Johnson. I mean, he was on the field after they won it all. He did a lot of interviews talking about that. And my point on that was, I had two major points. First one was if he turned Miami's home for him, so him turning that down is probably a big deal. Says a lot about this job. And then number two was, he didn't just sit on the couch and watch Scooby-Doo and eat Captain Crunch while he was out. I mean, he sat there and he was around and engaged with that program. And then you throw Rooney in there who got a bird's eye view of it. I can't imagine he doesn't know what he's getting into transfer portal wise and NIL wise. I mean, if it were another not LSU, like let's say it was someplace else, not in the SEC, I may have a little more concerns, but dude, it's LSU. They've been getting it done down there for a long, long time, one way or the other now. I mean, it's LSU. So I'm pretty sure he knows what he's getting into from that standpoint.
Absolutely.
I'll just add one thing, guys. The first time I heard this name, and I never put two and two together, Todd Walker was a longtime coworker of mine, and of course an LSU legend, an SEC legend. He knows Paul Mainieri very well.
Mhm.
Paul Mainieri was at this year's SEC tournament. John, you might have seen him while you were there. And Todd and Paul had a number of conversations because Paul is actually involved in the coaching search for LSU's last coach,
Right.
which is unusual because he was on his way out. But again, things are a little different over there. And Walker told me, he's like, yeah, I talked to Paul. He kept mentioning Ray Tanner for some reason. And I said, well, they're probably good friends, and shows you how smart I am. I'm like, they're all in that same fraternity, and I never put two and two together. But that, looking back in 2020 hindsight, that certainly was a conversation. This didn't just happen like in a vacuum 3 days ago. Ray was sending out feelers long before that, and I'm sure Paul let it be known that he wants to get back into it. And certainly we would be interested in a premier job like South Carolina. So just to JC's point, yeah, Paul hasn't just been sitting on the couch and playing 18. He's wanted to get back in. And I called several of his games his final year at LSU, and it was the same guy that I first saw in Omaha in 2002 when we were there. Carolina was with Notre Dame. Same energy, same vigor, same love for the game, same love for coaching. So it's not shocking that he wanted to get back in. But it certainly was a hire that none of us saw coming. I don't think anybody did. But you're getting a very invigorated Paul Mainieri. This is not your typical 60-something-year-old coach, which we'll talk more about later.